for the hardest-hitting show in talk radio. The true progressive voice since 2012. This is Southpaws.
And welcome to Southpaws on the Pacifica Radio Network. We are the leaders of the revolution. I'm Darren Gibson, your host today. We're going to talk about a lot of union activity here and abroad. We'll have an update for you on the protests in France regarding Emmanuel Macron's proposal to raise the retirement age. That's led to a lot of strikes and a lot of protesting. So we'll talk about France. We'll talk about why this isn't being done here. Why aren't workers this angry in the U.S.? We also have some union business out of Toledo, Ohio, a battery plant. Workers have gone on strike there, and it doesn't seem like management is backing them up much. Plus, speaking of unions, we might as well continue on into our Hammer Time segment. We've got two winners here involving wage theft or crossing picket lines. We'll get to that. We have another update from As Ottawa County Turns. We'll have that segment for you later. And a girl was strip searched at a private charter school over a vape pen. Yeah, that's surprising. So we will get to those stories here in just a minute. Plus, we got to mention the debt ceiling as well. And we might as well mention Lauren Boebert has filed for divorce. So we'll get to all those stories. We'll get to as much as we can in this hour or so. Before we get started with today's topics, a couple of reminders. You can follow us on social media by going to facebook.com/Southpaws Radio Show. You can follow us on Twitter at Southpaws Radio. You can follow us on Tumblr at southpawsradioshow.tumblr.com. You can follow us on YouTube and Mastodon by doing a search for Southpaws Radio, and you can become a patron of the show by going to patreon.com/Southpaws Radio. You can listen to the show anytime at Apple Podcasts, Spreaker, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, Podcast Addict, Podvine, and Pandora by doing a search for Southpaws. Once you found our logo, you found us. We send links to our weekly episodes to our Facebook, Twitter, Tumblr, YouTube, and Mastodon accounts. You can listen to us on Global Community Radio Channel 1 every Saturday night at 11 Eastern, and you can listen to us on great Pacifica stations, including KCEI in Taos, New Mexico, and KZGM in Kabul, Missouri. So be sure to listen to your local Pacifica affiliate. If your local affiliate is not carrying us, please call them and write them and ask them to please pick up our show. We would greatly appreciate it. We are recording this show on Thursday, May 18th. Reminder that next week's show, barring any more difficulties, will be our interview with Mason, Michigan City Councilor Rita Vogel. There has been a lot of activity that nobody knows about except Jack and I, but by the time that this episode airs, you'll know all about the efforts to stop this interview. So we'll talk about that. If not next week, we'll get to it in 2 weeks. But right now, I want to get to this story. This is Anthony Torres writing for the World Socialist website. This is dated May 10th, and we really need to use WSWS.org as a source more often because they have some great articles there. This is about what's happening in France. The French union bureaucracy's decision to wait until June 6th before the next protest against Macron's pension cuts while also reopening talks with him is a betrayal of the working class. Workers' militancy and the popular anger at Macron remain intact even after the adoption of the pension cuts as law. An overwhelming majority of the French people reject this illegitimate law of Macron, who rules openly against the people. 2/3 of French people want to block the economy with a general strike, but far from continuing the fight, The All-Trade Union Alliance is doing everything it can to stifle and demobilize the political struggle emerging between the workers and the capitalist state's illegitimate diktat to the people. This confirms the analysis of the PES. To fight against Macron, the workers must build their own organizations of struggle, rank-and-file committees of action to mobilize independently of the union apparatuses. In its communique, the Union Alliance admits there is broad opposition to Macron since 2.3 million people marched in May Day protests in France. But it offers an impotent perspective to restart negotiations with Macron while pretending to pressure the French National Assembly to oppose the cuts in a bill criticizing Macron's reform that might be brought before it on June 6th. The communique declares this. This bill, presented on June 6th at the National Assembly, will allow for the first time the national representation to vote on the pension reform. We call on our organizations to go and meet parliamentarians everywhere to call on them to vote on this bill. In this context, the Intersyndical calls to multiply initiatives with notably a new day of common action, strikes, and demonstrations on June 6th, allowing all the employees to be heard by the members of Parliament. So that's what the communique declares. Back to the story. This proposal is impotent because the National Assembly has already proven its hostility to the majority of French people who oppose Macron's reforms. In March, it decided not to censure Macron when he imposed this pension cut without a vote in the Assembly. Thus, the Assembly has indicated that in its majority it supports Macron's illegitimate reform. In reality, the All-Union Alliance is doing everything possible to chain the working class to the bourgeois parliamentarians in the Assembly and to political submission to the capitalist state. In reality, there is nothing to negotiate with Macron nor with the Assembly. The mobilization against the reform in recent months has clearly shown that the working class is in a political struggle against the entire capitalist state machine. The All-Union Alliance declares, on the other hand, that it will relaunch its negotiations with Macron, though without giving a precise schedule. Clearly, the union bureaucracies are joining the rest of the capitalist state apparatus that is trying to impose the reform on the French people. They write this. The government has announced the opening of a cycle of negotiations without the subject or the framework of the negotiations being precisely fixed. The trade unions will reiterate their rejection of the pension reform. They will work on joint inter-union proposals involving employers so that employees' concerns are finally taken into account in terms of wages, working conditions, health at work, social democracy, gender equality, and the environment in particular. Popular mistrust is deep, and the dialogue can only be restored if the government proves its willingness to finally take into account the proposals of the trade unions. Back to the story. The Parti de l'Égalité Socialiste has stressed that the situation is objectively revolutionary because of the irreconcilable conflict between the working class and Macron, and because this struggle is unfolding amid a wave of strikes by millions of workers in Germany, the UK, Portugal, Belgium, and beyond. NATO and Russia are rapidly moving toward a major escalation of war, and governments are discredited. To stop Macron's policies in this explosive political context, the working class must bring him down. The Intersyndical, on the other hand, wants to restart negotiations directly with Macron. It is now clear that they did not dare to do so before, not because they refused to negotiate with a dictator who tramples on the will of the people, but because they feared the workers would mobilize against both Macron and their own bureaucracies if they did so. The hostility of the union bureaucracies toward the interest and the struggle of the working class exposes these organizations, which are closely tied to the state. They impose the impoverishment of the workers in order to plunder the wealth created by the workers for the financial aristocracy and to finance Macron's war preparations. The cut in social spending carried out by this reform is to be used to finance the increase in the French military budget by about 90 billion euros before 2030. This policy is not the result of a tactical error by union leaders or the product of the personal corruption of one or another union leader. It reflects the material interests of the union leaders, a layer of the petty bourgeois hostile to revolutionary class struggle and closely tied to the state machine through corporatist social dialogue with the French presidency. In exchange for services rendered, the state and employers pay billions of euros each year to the union bureaucracies. This means top union officials receive salaries that are several times higher than the average worker's salary. In his 2012 report on the financing of the French unions, lawmaker Nicolas Perrochot wrote this, quote, "As we can see, almost 4 billion euros are probably spent annually on trade union activity in France. Most of these resources, 90%, seem to come from the exercise of the right to organize in companies and the civil service, while the direct contributions of union members in the form of dues would represent, after deduction of tax aid, only 3 to 4%. End of quote. The betrayal of the union bureaucracy also exposes the bankruptcy of the organizations of the petty bourgeois pseudo-left like the NPA, Revolution Permanente, or LO, which beg the union leaders to provide workers a battle plan against Macron. They reject revolutionary measures, instead advancing a national program subordinated to the democratic capitalist state. This is ultimately just a thin pseudo-left veneer applied to a policy of subordinating the working class to their negotiations with Macron and his police state. Strikes and struggles must continue against austerity and war and be linked up to struggles unfolding beyond the borders of France, independently of the pro-capitalist trade union apparatuses and their political allies. To do this, workers must create their own rank-and-file committees, breaking with the union bureaucracies to take control of their struggles. This is the only way to continue the struggle already begun against Macron, to prevent the unions from strangling the struggle and to stop Macron's attacks by bringing him down. I can't disagree with any of this. I honestly believe there should be a general strike in France. Everybody just quit work, sit down, or go in the streets and march and protest. Just don't do any work. It really is that simple. Let the rich people suffer some, because when they suffer, things change. You know, we've seen pictures and video of the protest, or at least some of us have. A lot of it's not being covered by the U.S. media because what happens over there is nobody's business, unless it's a war or the crowning of a king and queen in England, whatever. But there have been riot police that have been dispatched to quell these protests. There have been Molotov cocktails, etc., etc. I want to read a quote from Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. It's a quote I've read on this show before. And we talk about how peaceful Dr. King was, but we don't mention some of the other quotes that are a little more militant, like this one. A riot is the language of the unheard. He's right. That's just exactly what it is. When you don't listen to people's problems, they're going to lash out. That's just human nature. That's the way it is. If they're not going to get your attention by talking, they're going to get your attention in other ways. We've seen this. This is history. So my question when I shared the story about the upcoming protest on June 6th, I asked the question, why aren't we this angry? We as in the people of the United States. CEOs make hundreds of times more money than the actual workforce does, and they don't do anywhere near the work that actual blue-collar workers do, or for that matter, lower-level white-collar workers. I could even go a step further and say we have workers that have no shirts. We really do. So I asked on my personal Facebook, why aren't we this angry? Jack Prince was the first one to respond, and his quote was, because we have freedom. Freedom. You're free to be dumb. Well, he's right about his comment, because so many people are so stupid when it comes to unions. Oh, I don't want a union. I don't want to have to pay union dues. I don't want to have to pay into my own pension and pay into my own insurance and blah, 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 blah. Here's the thing of it, though. Union provides you protection against management trying to dismiss you from your work. At least that's the way it's supposed to be. Now, there are some unions that don't really work, and I'm not going to mention any names, but there are some that don't really work. I have said that a union is only as good as its membership, which is code for you need to attend your union meetings. You need to speak up. If you have somebody on the executive board that's not working for the employees, you run somebody against him and get him out. It really is that simple. Our friend Jeff Smith at the Grand Rapids Institute for Information Democracy, grid.org, responded. He said because too many people think that if they vote for Democrats, we'll be good. And he's right about that, too. Because most of the Democrats are on the side of the capitalists and the side of big business. Why? Because that's where most of their political money comes from. Funding from corporations, funding from big CEOs and executives. Money is the problem. If we got money out of politics, a lot of that would go away, especially if we had publicly funded elections, which that's probably not going to happen in my lifetime. Any municipality or any local government that has done this has gone to court and they've lost. I don't know of anybody in the United States, any government that's actually using publicly funded elections. And Joe Elder, who used to be a host on this show, would probably add to Jeff's comment that there's tribalism. Red bad, blue good. Well, here's the problem, is that you've got guys in the Democratic Party, John Bel Edwards in Louisiana, who hates abortion rights, and you've got Manchin in West Virginia that's nothing but a Republican. You might as well call him a conservative. And then you got a traitor like Kristen Sinema. This is what happens when you vote blue no matter who. This is what you get. There needs to be quality, actual progressives running, and you have to vote for actual progressives, whether they're Democrats, whether they're independents, whether they're part of the Green Party. It doesn't matter. Go with their platform, not a popularity contest, not red versus blue. And the last comment that I got on my question, why aren't we this angry, comes from our occasional co-host, Katie J. She just responded, it's not safe here to be this angry. And I totally agree with her, because look what happened when George Floyd was murdered and there were protests for that. Just even look at Grand Rapids. People were being charged with inciting riots, cops shooting pepper spray, hitting somebody in the face with a can of pepper spray. I don't think there's been any resolution toward that. I'll just say it. All cops are bastards, every single one of them. They really are. They're there to protect the corporate status quo. That's all they're there for. They're not there to investigate crimes. They come after the crime is committed to investigate, oh, we might be able to get them. We don't know. No, that's not how it should be. I'll just say it. Part of the reason why we have as much crime as we do is because of low-paying jobs. If you gave people a decent wage, if you gave them free single-payer universal health care, free college tuition, things like that, do you know how many people you could raise up with that? Sure, it's going to take some money out of the billionaires, but so what? As I say on this show just about every week, eat the rich. Eat the rich. I'm not talking figuratively, literally, boil them, eat them. Here's another example of labor discord. This is Jerry White writing for the World Socialist website. This is dated May 16th. Clarios Management has begun bringing strikebreakers into its Holland, Ohio battery manufacturing plant, where 525 United Auto Workers members have been on strike since May 8th. The move came 3 days after a Lucas County judge granted the company's request for an injunction to restrict picketing at the Toledo area plant to 5 union members at each entrance. Here's what I have to say about that. That judge is restricting free speech and the right to peacefully assemble. That's really all it is, folks. This judge needs to be kicked off the bench or prosecuted, preferably prosecuted. Let me continue the story here. Workers on the picket line sent photos to the World Socialist website of red school buses filled with strike breakers being driven in and out of the plant Monday. The company has put out ads for general labor positions paying $19 an hour for first and second shifts and $20 an hour for the third shift. You want to know what the UAW would have done in the 1930s if somebody was bussing in scabs? They'd overturn the bus and set it on fire. At the same time, Lucas County Sheriff's deputies are escorting the buses and trucks carrying stockpiled batteries through the picket lines so they can be delivered to auto plants in Ohio, Michigan, and other states. Private security guards are also taking videos and photographs of pickets for evidence of any violation of the judge's injunction. No, what the workers need to do is overrun the plant and have a sit-down strike in the plant, just like the coal workers did, just like the Carnegie Steel workers did, just like the UAW did in the 1930s. That brought them recognition and brought them a contract. The solution is simple. You just need leadership to have the guts to do it, and members for that matter. It really is that simple. The decision to use strike breakers is the most provocative action against striking workers in the Toledo area since auto supplier AP Parts used hundreds of scabs against 450 members of United Auto Workers Local 14 in the 1980s. Although thousands of Toledo area workers defied company and police violence to defend the AP Parts workers, the UAW bureaucracy isolated the struggle and after 10 months forced the workers to accept a pay cut of $2 an hour for new hires in a foreshadowing of the two-tier wage system the UAW would later accept. In the current situation, UAW bureaucracy headed by new President Shawn Fain has done nothing to mobilize the tens of thousands of UAW members in the region to stop Clarios' strike-breaking operation. Although there is widespread support among rank-and-file voters at nearby Ford, Stellantis, and General Motors plants for a ban on handling batteries from the strike-bound factory, the UAW bureaucracy is making sure there is no disruption to production and the profits of the big three automakers. The walkout of Clarios is the first strike in the 42-year history of the plant, which was previously owned by Johnson Controls until the Tier 1 parts supplier spun off its battery division to a group of private investors in 2019. Yeah, Johnson Controls is huge over in Holland and Zealand. Somehow I figure they might be involved in this. Clarios, the world's largest auto battery manufacturer, is pressing for major concessions, including the introduction of a so-called 2-2-3 schedule, which would force workers to work 12-hour shifts without any overtime payments after 8 hours. Yeah, here's my thought on that. The company has also cut workers' wages by $10 or more an hour by increasing quotas in its piece rate system. When UAW Local 12 and UAW International officials came back with a tentative agreement that included the new schedule, plus an insulting 3% pay increase for production workers and nothing for maintenance workers, rank-and-file workers rejected it by 98% on April 27th. After this stunning rebuke, UAW officials tried to defy the near-unanimous vote for strike action and came up with another deal they could sell to members, but they were forced by workers to finally call the strike 11 days later. One worker told World Socialist website, quote, "We are not going back on management's terms, we're going back on ours. We don't care if the UAW comes back with another deal. We're not going to take it if it includes the new schedule. Unions were built so the working man didn't have to work over 8 hours and was paid time and a half for more. We also didn't get any pay increases over the previous 6-year contract the UAW signed, and we want a good raise and cost of living protections against inflation." End of quote. Commenting on the cutoff of medical insurance by the company on May 13th and the use of scabs, this employee continued by saying, quote, "The company is not messing around. I can't even go to the picket line until it's my time because the judge's injunction won't allow it. Now they're bringing scabs. 2 busloads isn't enough to replace us. We're skilled and we know how to fix machines and put out the batteries. But the 15 billionaires who own this company are calling the shots and they want to make an example of us. Back in the day, the UAW would put a ban on all these batteries until we won the strike. They're not doing that. I appreciate the support that we are getting from UAW members, and if we can stick together, we can win. End of quote. A maintenance worker picketing on Sunday told the World Socialist website, quote, "This company has seen its market value go up 5 times since the private equity firm Brookfield Business Partners took over. Johnson Controls had a market capitalization of $60 billion. For Clarios, it's $350 billion. If they jump ship and sell off the company, the big investors will pocket millions. We're in the trenches doing all the work, and we're the ones who will say what is a good contract and what isn't." End of quote. Another maintenance worker added this, quote, 50% of what we build goes to Ford. The strike is going to hit all the auto companies. This place is dangerous. In the few years I've been here, I know 5 people who died of cancer, and some of them didn't even make it to retirement. One died last Tuesday. The judge said we're making it unsafe, but every day we're in there, the company threatens our safety. End of quote. Another striker added, quote, "The union is supposed to be back at the table with the company, but we haven't heard anything. We know that in the UAW we're fighting a well-organized machine, but it's only been a week and we are determined to hold out. Hopefully we can get together with Dana and Jeep workers and get a real working-class movement going, one that shows how much workers matter and build up real momentum. If we can win, it will be good not only for us, but for every auto worker and the future generations." End of quote. The fight can only be won if workers at Clarios and throughout the big 3 auto plants take the conduct of the struggle into their own hands by expanding the network of worker-controlled rank-and-file committees. And once again, rank-and-file committees comes up in an article by World Socialist website. Skipping down a little bit, at the same time, auto workers at the Toledo Jeep Assembly Complex, Dana, and other factories should organize their own rank-and-file strike solidarity committees to invite Clarios workers to hold joint informational pickets at their plants, demonstrations, and other actions to support the fight. And that's a good idea, too. I'm glad that the World Socialist website is shining the spotlight on what's happening in France and in Toledo, Ohio. This is absolutely ridiculous behavior by this company. Again, another reason to eat the rich. All right, so let's go ahead to our next segment.
Stop. Hammer time.
Oh, yeah, it's hammer time. It's time to drop the hammer on the douchebag of the week. We've got 2 winners for you this week, so every time we have 2 winners, we let Wade Garrett chime in.
The double douche.
Who is that guy?
Gentlemen,
Wade Garrett. Holy sh**.
exactly right.
All right, Wade Garrett serves up winner number 1, Jeopardy host Ken Jennings. So what did Ken Jennings do? He crossed the picket line at the Writers Guild of America strike. I have the story here. This is written by Elise Wanschel, writing for HuffPost. This is dated May 16th. And it's surprising who called out Ken Jennings on this. The headline of the story says, Big Bang Theory star scorches Jeopardy host Ken Jennings for crossing picket line. So, of course, everybody is going, oh, Mayim Bialik. Mayim Bialik scorched him. It wasn't her. Well, we know one person who will never be invited to a secret celebrity Dungeons & Dragons game. Will Wheaton, who regularly guest starred on The Big Bang Theory as himself and Sheldon's sometimes nemesis, posted his disgust of Jeopardy co-host Ken Jennings Monday. I love this. I love Will Wheaton. I've got a deeper respect for Will Wheaton for this than anything he has ever done, including Star Trek The Next Generation. This is beautiful stuff here. Let me continue. According to a post published on Facebook by Wheaton, the Star Trek alum was deeply annoyed by a Daily Beast story about Jennings crossing the Writers Guild of America's picket line to keep the longtime game show running during the writers' strike. Jennings' Jeopardy co-host and Wheaton's former Big Bang co-star Mayim Bialik reportedly backed out of taping the game show for the rest of the season in an act of solidarity with WGA writers who are picketing over pay and working conditions. By the way, this reporter notes that HuffPost's unionized employees are represented by the Writers Guild of America East. Wheaton began his scathing post this way, quote, "This is a very small town, Ken Jennings, and we will all remember this. Your privilege may protect you now, but we will never forget," end of quote. Bialik and Jennings became the permanent co-host of Jeopardy in July 2022 and have been alternating hosting duties ever since. But due to Bialik reportedly stepping out to support WGA writers, Jennings will replace her on the last episodes of the season, set for taping on the Sony lot this week, according to Deadline. Jeopardy uses Writers Guild of America writers to write their clues, Deadline reports, and some, including Michelle Loud, Jim Ryan, and Billy Wiss, have reportedly joined the picket line. However, the outlet also reports that writers completed their duties ahead of the season and the strike. Jeopardy writer Michelle Loud told Variety recently, quote, "Our words are on the screen every night. There is no Jeopardy without writers. Without us, it's just an empty blue screen," end of quote. So apparently some people responded with anti-union comments toward Will Wheaton's post, and he wrote back to them this way, "Hey y'all, if you're here to shit on unions, you can f*** right off," end of quote. I love this. He continued, quote, "I've been a union man since I was a union boy, and I will be a union man until the day I die. If you're here to shit on the workers of the world or to make excuses for someone who is currently doing that, go f*** yourself and come back," end of quote. Real, oh, I love it. Oh, Will, you are my hero. So winner number 1 is Ken Jennings. Winner number 2, Popeyes Chicken and Biscuit, or Louisiana Kitchen, whatever the hell they're calling themselves, is Popeyes. I have this story from God at dailydot.com. This is dated May 4th. I've got another hero in this story too. Listen to this, folks. A Popeyes worker decided to take matters into his own hands after not getting paid by the company for a month. TikToker at Isra26 brought the incident to light on her page, sharing video of a man in a red hoodie absolutely trashing the kitchen at the Popeyes where she works, ripping apart bags of raw chicken and dumping various food containers onto the ground. Other clips show kitchen storage and cardboard boxes strewn about, and the cord to what may be part of the cash register at the front counter cut. This is rage quitting, and I love it. This is chaotic good in my book. Although the man doesn't say anything during the video himself, the TikToker included a text overlay reading, quote, "This is what happens when you don't get paid for a month," end of quote. The final clip shows an empty, open cash register drawer before panning to show a Chicago police vehicle pulled up outside. She added, quote, "At least he got his money," end of quote. Various forms of wage theft account for an estimated $50 billion of theft in the United States per year, significantly outpacing crimes such as burglary at $3 billion and motor vehicle theft at $6 billion. But the power systems in place often prevent workers from reporting it, and when they do, companies are often ultimately not forced to pay up, let alone suffer any meaningful financial or criminal penalties for breaking the law. Let me again add, this is Chicago, but it's also happening elsewhere. Popeyes in particular has already been accused of not paying workers just this year, with employees at a Texas location turning to local news in the hopes of forcing the company to pay up after going through proper channels stalled out. Because of the power imbalance in place and the lack of repercussions for companies who steal from employees, even viewers of the viral video from Chicago who were sympathetic with the workers' plight warned that the only one who would end up facing consequences here would be him. Sure enough, Popeyes confirmed that they called the police on the now former employee. They also claimed that the reason they had not paid him was because he hadn't provided banking information. Oh, really? Cut him a check. There's your answer. Although that response did not fly with a lot of people, including me, as you just heard. It's unclear at this time whether any charges have been pressed against the former employee, and nobody is holding their breath for the franchisee to face any consequences for declining to pay wages for a month leading to the incident in the first place. So they mentioned Texas. I have a follow-up story. This is Darren Wallace writing for KCEN Television out of Temple, Texas. This is dated January 17th, so this has been going on for a while. Let me set this up. The week earlier, KCEN reported that Popeye's employees at the West Adams Avenue location hadn't been paid in a while. So they did a follow-up to the story, and this is it. A week later, Popeye's employees at the West Adams Avenue location say they still haven't been paid. LaToya Williams has been vocal in her support for her son who works at the location and says it's not fair to any of them that they've gone this long without being paid. Williams said, quote, "They really think they can just get over people, like not paying them or whatever. But for me, it's not going to happen. Not on my account," end of quote. Williams said she reached out to Popeye's corporate, Sun Holdings LLC, who is the owner of the location on West Adams, and the Texas Workforce Commission. No one has helped her and her son out. She told 6 News that the Popeyes location offered a payout loan of $400 to her son that he would have to pay back, and that's the best offer they've made. She said she's told her son to absolutely take nothing less than the full amount he is owed. Williams said, quote, "It's not going to happen. I told my son not to take the payout or whatever. They owe him money. Why do you have to give him back something that's already owed to you? It doesn't make sense," end of quote. Williams says there's been no word or promise of pay. Williams says it's gone too far and any attempts to compensate employees don't feel genuine. She added, quote, "Y'all Popeyes don't want to be on blast. They're trying to make it seem like they're trying to help, but they're really not trying to help. They sent someone from Dallas to try and remedy the situation, but it just feels like a stunt," end of quote. But Williams says she will continue to stick up for the workers until someone helps them out. She added, quote, "I'm not only speaking for my son, I'm speaking for the others as well because it's just not fair. They should be willing to give everybody that payout thing. It should be like, okay, this is what I can give you out of my pocket, or I can write you a check for this amount of money. I know that ain't going to cover what we owe you, but here's something toward your bills or something." They're not even trying to do that, end of quote. Sun Holdings LLC has yet to reply to News 6 for comment, and I doubt that that'll ever happen. So to Ken Jennings and Popeyes, we have this message for you.
Don't be a douchebag.
Yeah, that's right. Stop crossing picket lines and pay your employees. Fast food is really notorious for trying to crush unions, too. Let me just add that, because I haven't said it nearly enough. Eat the rich. Boil them and eat them. Oh, boy. Let me go ahead and let's get off of labor here. Let's get to this story. This is Steve Nieveling writing for the Detroit Metro Times dated May 3rd. Folks, listen to this atrocity. A mother is suing a Detroit charter school after she says her 8th grade daughter was strip searched without her consent over a vape pen that didn't exist. The lawsuit filed in Wayne County Circuit Court on Wednesday alleges the George Crockett Academy violated the 14-year-old girl's constitutional rights when the principal authorized 2 female staff members to conduct the strip search without notifying the mother on April 25th. According to the lawsuit, no vape pen was found because she didn't have one. The mother's attorney, Hannah Fielstra of the Ernst Law Firm in Detroit, said in a statement, quote, "It has long been said that students do not shed their constitutional rights at the schoolhouse door. The school had no justifiable reason to strip search an 8th grade girl for a vape pen. It is not a weapon and did not present an imminent danger to anyone. There were no credible threats of violence. A strip search is one of the most invasive searches recognized by law, and it was performed on a teenage girl during school. The circumstances of this strip search were not only humiliating, but her constitutional rights were violated. The school went too far. End of quote. Detroit Metro Times is not identifying the girl or her mother to protect their privacy. According to the lawsuit, school officials should have been skeptical of the claims about the student. Earlier that day, another student who had a history of bullying the 8th grader told school staff that the girl had a vape pen in her underwear. The lawsuit states, quote, defendants failed to ask any follow-up questioning to corroborate the accusation with any details that would suggest that the female student with known animosity toward the plaintiff had any first-hand knowledge that the vape pen was in her underwear. End of quote. The search took place in an office with 2 windows, one of which was not covered, according to the lawsuit. The student was forced to remove her shirt and pants, lift up her bra, and fold down the top of her underwear, knowing she was on her period. After initially claiming the strip search had not occurred, the school later said the student had volunteered to be searched, a claim that the 8th grader denied, according to the lawsuit. The lawsuit also states that the school has a history of, quote, performing strip searches on minor students without parental consent, end of quote. The lawsuit alleges school officials violated the student's Fourth Amendment rights and caused her mental anguish, emotional distress, humiliation, and embarrassment. George Crockett Academy did not immediately respond to a message seeking comment. You're not going to hear from them. I hope they sue that school for $100 million. Bankrupt them. This is the only way you get through to these knuckleheads, is to bankrupt them. Hit them where it hurts, right in the wallet. When I say that about public schools, everybody bitches and complains, oh, but that's just taxpayers' money. Well, then you should be angry at the school, not at the person suing the school. The school did wrong. They need to pay up. If it's part of your tax money, tough shit. Get on the school board and stop it. Unbelievable. People are so angry at the wrong targets on just about everything. If you're angry at somebody, you need to sit down, cool off, and think to yourself, why am I angry at this person? Why am I angry at that union worker for having a union job? When the question should be, why don't I have a union job? Why am I not getting paid good wages and good benefits? I've said that before, and I'll continue to say it until the day that I take my last breath. Swear to God, it's just unbelievable. All right, let's get to some levity here, or at least some partial levity. And for that, we have to play the intro music. Here we go. And now, Hawker and Ramble present As Ottawa County Turns. Brought to you by Drowsy Fabric Softener. It makes your clothes smell so fresh that you'll want to take a nap. Yes, indeed, and even just hearing the word nap makes me want to take a nap. I guess my age is showing. But I'm still young at heart, that's all that matters. All right, let's get to our update on Ottawa County. This is Jared Lietzau writing for the Grand Haven Tribune. This article is dated May 11th. Ottawa County Commissioner Jacob Bonnet of Zeeland didn't pull any punches Tuesday, offering up critical comments about the County Administrator John Gibbs, the board chairperson Joe Moss, and the county's corporate legal counsel Coleman Legal Group. It was during a discussion about the Memorandum of Understanding for the Community Health Needs Assessment and the county's Youth Assessment Survey that Bonnet took his first shot. Voting on the MOU had already been delayed twice by the board. It required approval for the county to get reimbursed by the local hospitals and nonprofits they work with on the CHNA. Bonnet started the conversation civilly. Quote, Mr. Chair, thank you for encouraging us to take the time to ask questions and to get answers. It is very valuable to the process. End of quote. He then pivoted the conversation. He said, quote, I know about half the board has struggled to get answers from our administrator. To date, I have not received one single response to my numerous emails to the administrator. This process, as we are going into budget season, requires answers to questions. My job as a commissioner is to provide oversight. If I cannot ask questions or get answers in any kind of timely manner, it prevents me from being able to perform my job. End of quote. Although previously affiliated with the political organization Ottawa Impact, Bonnet now finds himself outside their inner circle. He struggles to be heard by its members, who make a majority of the commission. This isn't the first time Bonnet has accused Moss of not communicating with him, saying back in March that weeks would go by before he would hear back from Moss. Bonnet has since become the target of ridicule from public commenters who support the current leadership and on the website Simply American Media, which operates as the de facto media wing for Ottawa Impact. All of the published articles are written under various aliases. Yeah, they're being written by Moss and Rodea, most likely, my opinion. They're not media, they're propaganda, just like Fox Propaganda Channel. Propaganda. They spew their bullshit and hope everybody eats it up willingly. Just laps it up like a thirsty dog. Moss is shown to have filed paperwork for Simply American LLC, guessed it, with Michigan's Department of Corporate Licensing and Regulatory Affairs. Yeah, it's all Moss. It really is. Hey, did I get it right? Survey says you got that. According to the Holland Sentinel, John Gibbs is under investigation for threatening behavior, according to a complaint filed by Bonnet in March. In an email filed March 21st, Bonnet requested Human Resources Director Marcy Verbeek open a disciplinary investigation into Gibbs after what Bonnet described as a threatening outburst at the board's March 14th meeting. The exchange was overheard by a reporter from local ABC affiliate WZZM-TV, which reported on it the same day. Bonnet told Verbeek that, quote, if Gibbs is willing to speak to commissioners in this way, then he is very likely to treat the employees and citizens of Ottawa County in similar fashion, end of quote. In the complaint, Bonnet wrote that, after attempting to have a question answered by Gibbs, the county administrator shouted, quote, get out of my face, dude. End of quote. Lovely. Dude. Again, this is the same John Gibbs that don't think that women should be leading in any government office, or for that matter, any business. They should be kept barefoot and pregnant at home. Really, that's how he thinks. Backwards thinking. Totally backwards 1800s thinking. During a presentation by the county clerk, Justin Roebuck, Bonnet decided to speak up again. Bonnet and Commissioner Rebecca Curran defended Roebuck and his character to the Ottawa Impact-affiliated commissioners. As part of an ongoing lawsuit against the county commission by the county's public health officer, Adeline Hambley, Roebuck was accused by the Coleman Legal Group of altering documents that prevented the Ottawa Impact-affiliated commissioners from removing her from the position. Roebuck said, quote, it is a privilege to serve, and I have served for almost 9 years as the clerk to this board. I think trust and integrity matter so much. I want to address an issue that has come up recently. Corporation Counsel for the County of Ottawa on March 31st in public court made an accusation against me that I secretly altered documents that were passed by this board and that I violated the Open Meetings Act. I want to address that publicly here and let you know that as your clerk, those allegations are patently and demonstratively false. End of quote. Speaking to Roebuck directly, Bonnet said, quote, whenever I've had questions from the community, you've gone out of the way to answer the questions in full and give them all the time to really investigate what their concerns were. I really admire that about you. These baseless claims against your department from the Coleman Group, I grew very concerned, especially since they never reached out to you to talk about their concerns. They just used them in court. So I also agree with Commissioner Curran, and I apologize for that happening. I would hate to see that ever happen again, and it should not happen. You have my full confidence and many of the other commissioners' confidence. End of quote. Whoo, he just shut them right down. Oh, I love it. This is beautiful. So that's our update on Ottawa County, which means we got to get out of here. We'll have to wait for next week for another episode. Too sad. Join us again soon for another edition of As Ottawa County Turns. This program is produced for Big D Entertainment. Stay tuned for The Edge of Blight over most of these stations. I still have to catch an episode of The Edge of Blight. Wonder how good it is. All right, before we get into the budget, I want to get to a little more good news. Oh, No, I don't. I love this. I don't care. Oh, you shouldn't be cheering other people's misery. No, when I tell you who it is, you'll be like, yeah, f*** her. This is CBS Colorado reporting May 17th. U.S. Representative Lauren Boebert, who represents Colorado's 3rd Congressional District, has filed for divorce from her husband. The Republican representing Colorado Congressional District 3 filed the petition for divorce from Jason Boebert last month. Boebert narrowly won re-election for the U.S. House seat by 546 votes last November to Democrat Adam Frisch. Frisch has already announced his candidacy for the 2024 election. In a text message to the Daily Beast, Jason Boebert said, quote, "The divorce is sad. I did not expect this. I love her with every bit of my heart. She has been my soulmate, and she is the mother of my children." End of quote. Yeah, that's when Jason isn't showing his dick to underage girls in a bowling alley. In March, the 36-year-old Bobo announced that she is going to become a grandmother. Yes, she became a mother at a young age, and then she taught her kid not to use birth control or to be sloppy with sex or whatever, and now she's going to be a grandmother. God, I feel bad for that grandchild. It's probably going to grow up dumber than her. Yeah, you can go ahead, send that hate mail, southpawsradio@gmail.com. If it's really good, I'll read it on the air with your name if you have the guts to put it down. I mean it. I just don't care anymore. I'm going to call people out. I'm going to call them what they are. And if you don't like it, that's just too bad, because this is my show. I'm the one holding the microphone. So there you go. And finally, let's talk about the debt limit. This is Lisa Mascaro and Seung-Min Kim writing for the Associated Press out of Washington. This article is dated May 17th. Debt limit talks shifted into an encouraging new phase Tuesday as President Joe Biden and House Speaker Kevin McCarthy named top emissaries to negotiate a deal to avert an unprecedented national default. Biden cut short an upcoming overseas trip in hopes of closing an agreement before a June 1st deadline. The fresh set of negotiators means discussions are now largely narrowed to what the White House and McCarthy will accept in order to allow lawmakers to raise the debt limit in the coming days. The speaker said after a meeting with Biden and congressional leaders that a deal was possible by week's end, even as, in McCarthy's view, the two sides remained far apart for the moment. Biden was publicly upbeat after a roughly hour-long meeting in the Oval Office, despite having to cancel the Australia and Papua New Guinea portions. He said, quote, "There's still work to do, but I made it clear to the speaker and others that we'll speak regularly over the next several days, and staff's going to continue meeting daily to make sure we do not default." End of quote. Senior White House officials, as well as top aides to the 4 congressional leaders, McCarthy, the Republican out of California, Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, Democrat of New York, Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, Republican of Kentucky, and House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, Democrat of New York, have been meeting daily. But now Steve Ricchetti, counselor to the President, Office of Management and Budget Director Shalonda Young, and Legislative Affairs Director Louisa Terrell will take the lead in negotiations for the Democratic side, while Representative Garrett Graves, Republican of Louisiana, a key McCarthy ally who has been a point person for the Speaker on debt and budget issues, will represent Republicans. As he returned to the Capitol, McCarthy said, quote, "Now we have a format, a structure," end of quote. Negotiators are racing to beat a deadline of June 1st, which is when the Treasury Department has said the U.S. could begin defaulting on its debts for the first time in history and risk a financial catastrophe. The revised itinerary of Biden's upcoming trip showed the urgency of the talks. National Security Council spokesperson John Kirby said, quote, "We wouldn't even be having this discussion about the effect of the debt ceiling on the trip if Congress would do its job, raise the debt ceiling the way they've always done," end of quote. Even as the Democratic president and the Republican speaker box around the politics of the issue, with Biden insisting he's not negotiating over the debt ceiling and McCarthy working to extract spending cuts with the backdrop of a potential default, various areas of possible agreement appear to be emerging. Among the items on the table, clawing back some $30 billion in untapped COVID-19 money, imposing future budget caps, changing permit regulations to ease energy development, and putting bolstered work requirements on recipients of government aid. That's according to those familiar with the talks. Yeah, I got news for you. Most of the people that are on SNAP are already working. But congressional Democrats are growing concerned about the idea of putting new work requirements for government aid recipients after Biden suggested over the weekend he may be open to such changes. The White House remains opposed to changes in requirements for recipients of Medicaid and food stamp programs, although it is more open to revisions for beneficiaries of the Temporary Assistance for Needy Families Cash Assistance Program. What you folks need to do is to call the Capitol Switchboard, 202-224-3121, and tell your congressman and both your senators to vote no on this package here, if it's going to include cuts to the needy, because the Republicans are greedy. That might be a new chorus for a rap. Cuts to the needy, Republicans are greedy. Cuts to the needy, Republicans are greedy. I like that. The idea of imposing more work requirements was resoundingly rejected by House Democrats at a morning caucus meeting, according to one Democrat at the private meeting, and granted anonymity to discuss it. Progressive lawmakers in particular have raised the issue. Representative Pramila Jayapal, the chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, said, quote, "We want to make sure that these negotiations do not include spending cuts, do not include work requirements, things that would harm people in rural areas, black, brown, indigenous folks," end of quote. Democratic leader Jeffrey's staff sought to assuage the concerns late Monday, while a separate group of more centrist Democrats signaled to their moderate Republican colleagues they are prepared to work something out to reach a debt ceiling deal, aides said Tuesday. While McCarthy has complained the talks are slow going, saying he first met with Biden more than 100 days ago, Biden has said it took McCarthy all this time to put forward his own proposal after Republicans failed to produce their own budget this year. Compounding pressure on Washington to strike a deal, Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen said Monday that estimates are unchanged on the possible X date when the U.S. could run out of cash. But Yellen, in a letter to the House and Senate, left some opening for a possible time extension on a national default, saying that, quote, "The actual date Treasury exhausts extraordinary measures could be a number of days or weeks later than these estimates. It is essential that Congress act as soon as possible. In my assessment and that of economists across the board, a U.S. default would generate an economic and financial catastrophe," end of quote. This article is absolute proof positive that Republicans don't give a f*** about you. They really don't. They could let you starve in the street. They would just walk right over your corpse and stroll on like they didn't see a thing. That's the difference between progressives and conservatives. Progressives want to stop this type of cuts to needy people. Republicans don't. That's it for this week. I'm Darren Gibson. Please support independent media, the First Amendment, and a woman's right to choose.
The stations that carry Southpaws do not necessarily share the opinions expressed on the show. Southpaws is protected by the First Amendment to the U.S. Constitution and is copyrighted by Big D Entertainment. All rights reserved.